China has a problem. Its young people aren't having enough children. The Chinese population shrinking for the first time since the Great Famine in 1961. And at the same time, its population is getting older. This could affect the planet's biggest power struggle, China versus America, and the fight for economic dominance. China's population decline has really come faster than was expected. It could mean economic stagnation. It could also mean that China may never eclipse the US as the world's largest economy. Now China needs to take radical steps to change the nature of its economy, or it risks getting old before it gets rich. From 1979 to 2016, this limited couples to having one child, and this, coupled with rising education and urbanization, dramatically reduced the birth rate. Now, even though having more than one child is permitted, most people in this generation would balk at the idea of having larger families, or any children at all. Even after the one-child policy was relaxed, the birth rate did not rise significantly, and this is one of the major factors in the changing shape of Chinese society. Many analysts think it will overtake America as the world's largest economy around the end of this decade, but China's economic growth has actually slowed in recent years, and a fall in the working-age population could place further strain on the economy. China, one of the reasons that it did so well was that it had what economists refer to as a demographic dividend, which meant that you had this massive potential labor force to staff its factories, so China became the world's biggest manufacturing power. Well, now the working-age population is beginning to shrink, which is going to push wages up, and equally for the government, it's looking at a pension system which is incredibly underfunded right now. It could leave huge burdens for a lot of elderly people and their offspring who are not taken care of by the social security system. So the spending priorities are going to look very, very different to how they've looked over the past few decades. The scale of the problem was revealed in China's once-in-a-decade census. China has released data from its 2020 national census, and it shows the slowest population growth for decades. As this labor force is shrinking, will China still have the same driving force for its economic growth, but also for global economic growth? The Chinese Communist Party really needs to not only shift its growth model, but also it needs to rapidly increase spending on pensions and healthcare. If it fails, it could mean economic stagnation. And it could also mean that China may never eclipse the US as the world's largest economy. The Chinese Communist Party was quick to act and announced that families would be able to have 3 children in the future, but it may not be enough to encourage a baby boom. These days, marriage and children are not high on many young people's agenda. In 2005, most women in Shanghai were married by the time they were 23, but in 2019, this had shot up to 29, and most women here will have just one child, as opposed to 2.4 on average worldwide. But for some, delaying family isn't a choice. Despite having newfound freedoms, some young people, particularly those working in tech, are still expected to work punishingly long hours. It's called the 996, because it involves working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, and this doesn't leave much time for having children. It's not just the 996. The pressure is high in lots of areas of life. Average house prices in Shanghai are 23 times median incomes. That's twice the ratio in London. So anything more than a 2-bedroom flat is well beyond the reach of most middle-class people. State-subsidized childcare for children under 3 is almost non-existent in China. So many young people rely on their parents or in-laws for support. Given these pressures, initiatives like the 3-child policy are unlikely to entice many people to have more babies. But there are some signs of change. Along with the announcement that couples could have more children, the 3-child policy included pledges to improve maternity benefits, lower the cost of education, and improve state-funded nursing homes, all of which could help boost the birth rate and improve women's lives. It's clearly a signal to a variety of ministries in China that they need to get their act together on this and start investing serious money. China is trying to turn a very heavy ship around at the moment. It's going from decades of spending on infrastructure to now trying to plow money into threadbare pension plans and set up child care facilities that are simply not there. Some fear this demographic conundrum could jeopardize China's ambition for global economic dominance, but this might not be the case. As even if China can encourage its young people to have more children, it has found other ways to make up for the shortfall in workers. The first is through automation. China now accounts for about 1/3 of all industrial robots installed globally each year. Companies are investing heavily in automation. They recognize that Wage costs have been going up that it's harder and harder to recruit employees. So businesses are becoming much more digitized, manufacturing is becoming much more automated. But this isn't just about robots. The workforce is also becoming better educated. Since 2010, the number of graduates in China has doubled. You're going to have a labor force that's getting smaller, but that's also getting more highly skilled. Even if the size of the workforce shrinks, at least for the next 10 to 15 years, the increase in the skill set will more or less cancel out the decrease in the actual size of the population. This increased skill set has also allowed China to move to so-called higher value economic sectors. So rather than being the workshop of the world, as it was 20 years ago, the country is fast becoming a world leader in technology, like mobile payments and e-commerce. You no longer need to have factories with thousands of people in them. Instead, you could have small laboratories that are producing cutting-edge sciences. So those are the kinds of industries that China is trying to develop. The final factor driving this development is the number of people moving to cities. 64% of people in China now live in urban areas, up from less than 50% 10 years ago, and this could help because those working in cities are generally more productive than rural laborers. But for economic growth to really take off, one aspect of city living needs to change: the grueling 996. When you think about productivity going forward, it's not just about squeezing more out of every individual worker, it's about having a society that's happy, and a happy society is likely to be one that's going to be more innovative. So just having people stapled to their desks trying to crank out code morning to night, that's not a recipe for a happy, productive society in the long term. Young people more focused on enjoying life than having children or working from dawn to dusk, but perhaps that need not concern the CCP, as the odds are that China will be neck and neck with America to become the world's largest economy within the next decade. Despite its demographic challenge, China will both get old and will get rich at the same time. One doesn't necessarily cancel the other out. But in the future, China will need to invest heavily in social care, both for young children and the elderly, and this is something the country has never done before. So while it may not stop China from getting rich, its aging society will undoubtedly change what it feels like to live in the world's second largest economy.